Oh, come in, come in. Just getting this going. Do have a seat. Or just close that door, shall we? We can. Well, nice to see you again. And you know, it's such fun looking at that that lovely episode, the chapter called "The Three Sleepers," when they're getting really towards the beginning of the end of the world, and they find Aslan's table, and there are these wonderful echoes back, as I talked about last time. There's echoes of particularly the Grail stories, because just as in the Grail castle there is the spear of Longinus that pierced the heart of Christ, so on Aslan's and the Grail, when it appears, of course, gives a feast with everything everybody likes. So here is the stone knife that was used to slay Aslan. In fact, it's interesting, it's called Aslan's table because, of course, the stone table upon which Aslan dies breaks in two. And, of course, Lewis is very careful in the choice of the word stone table, because the law is given to Moses on tablets of stone, and in a sense the cracking of that stone table is the movement from the law to the gospel, to grace, and Aslan's table is a place of abundance. Anyway, all of that's going on, but it's not by any means the end of the story. Really, it's one episode divided over two chapters, because they've met Ramandu's daughter, but they're now to meet Ramandu himself. So I thought we'd just read on. It's so rich. So, you may remember, we ended here, there's this wonderful picture of Reepicheep lifting up the cup. Reepicheep is the kind of Galahad of this, really. "Why is it called Aslan's table?" asked Lucy presently. "It is set here by his bidding," said the girl, "for those who come so far. Some call this island the world's end, for though you can sail further, this is the beginning of the end." And then Eustace, the practical, asked, "How does the food keep the glorious feast on Aslan's table?" "It is eaten and renewed every day," said the girl. "This you will see." And what are we to do about the sleepers? Asked Caspian. And there's a very nice oblique thing from Lewis here. What are we to do about the sleepers? Asked Caspian. And then he looks at the beautiful daughter of Ramandu and he says, "In the world from which my friends come," here he nodded at Eustace and the Pevensies, "they have a story of a prince or a king coming to a castle where all the people lay in an enchanted sleep. In that story, he could not dissolve the enchantment until he had kissed the princess. But here," said the girl, "it is different. Here, he cannot kiss the princess until he has dissolved the enchantment." "Then," said Caspian, "in the name of Aslan, show me how to set about that work at once." So there we are, very obliquely and very unusually for Lewis, the introduction of a little element of romance, or in the ordinary sense of that word. "Let us begin that work at once. My father will teach you that," said the girl. "Your father," said everyone. "Who is he and where?" "Look," said the girl, turning round and pointing at the door in the hillside. They could see it more easily now, for while they had been talking, the stars had grown fainter, and great gaps of white light had appeared in the greyness of the eastern sky. And then comes a wonderful passage. Slowly, the door opened again, and out there came a figure as tall and straight as the girl's, but not so slender. It carried no light, but light seemed to come from it. As it came nearer, Lucy saw that it was like an old man. His silver beard came down to his bare feet in front, and his silver hair hung down to his heels behind, and his robe appeared to be made from the fleece of a silver sheep. He looked so mild and grave that once more all the travellers rose to their feet and stood in silence. But the old man came on without speaking to the travellers, and stood on the other side of the table opposite to his daughter. Then both of them held up their arms before them and turned to face the east. In that position, they began to sing. I wish I could write down the song, but no one who was present could remember it. Lucy said afterwards that it was high, almost shrill, but very beautiful, a cold kind of song, an early morning kind of song. And as they sang, the grey clouds lifted from the eastern sky, and the white patches grew bigger and bigger till it was all white, and the sea began to shine like silver. And long afterwards, but those two sang all the time, the east began to turn red, and at last, unclouded, the sun came up out of the sea, and its long level rays shot down the length of the table on the gold and silver and on the stone knife. Once or twice before, the Narnians had wondered whether the sun at its rising did not look bigger in these seas than it had looked at home. This time they were certain. There was no mistaking it, and the brightness of its ray on the dew and on the table was far beyond any morning brightness they had ever seen. And as Edmund said afterwards, though lots of things happened on that trip that sound more exciting, that moment really was the most exciting. For now they knew they had truly come to the beginning of the end of the world. It's wonderful. And the particular note about the light falling on the stone knife. Because, of course, if you remember back to the stone table and the stone knife and the death of Aslan, when we wait for the resurrection, it comes with the very first rays of the morning sun. So that the rising sun and the sun in the east is the orientation. It's always about resurrection. Then comes this extraordinary thing. Then something seemed to be flying at them out of the very centre of the rising sun. And of course one couldn't look steadily in that direction to make sure. But presently the air became full of voices, voices which took up the same song that the lady and her father were singing, but in far wilder tones and in a language which no one knew. And soon after that the owners of these voices could be seen. They were birds, large and white, and they came by hundreds and thousands and alighted on everything, on the grass and the pavement, on the table, on your shoulders, your hands and your head, till it looked as if heavy snow had fallen. For like snow, they not only made everything white, but blurred and blunted all shapes. But Lucy, looking out from between the wings of the birds that covered her, saw one bird fly to the old man with something in its beak that looked like a little fruit, unless it was a little live coal, which it might have been, for it was too bright to look at, and the bird laid it in the old man's mouth. And of course you can read that as a child and be just amazed by it. And it's only much later as you grow up and you learn your scriptures and you hear readings in church and so on, that you remember the bird that came and fed Elijah and kept him going. But mostly you remember the moment when, as Isaiah sees the Lord lifted up and mighty and sees into the very heart of heaven and the seraphim singing, holy, holy, holy. And you remember an angel takes a live coal from the fire that burns at the altar and touches Isaiah's lips with it to make him clean and ready for his mission. And it's clearly, for Christians, it's a Eucharistic reference. It's the kind of way. And there it all is just very gently in. It's a kind of, it's as though he's playing a riff or a medley on that, but giving you the primal image. Then, of course, the birds stop their singing and they clean up everything that's on the table and they take everything away. And then they're told that to break the enchantment, they must sail to the world's end and they must leave at least one of their company there. Then Caspian asks a question. which elicits a very interesting answer from Ramandu and leads to one of my all-time favourite Narnian moments, which is a brief conversation between Ramandu, this great silver-haired sage, and our friend Eustace Scrub. So, "Are we near the world's end now, sir?" asked Caspian. "Have you any knowledge of the seas and lands further east than this?" "I saw them long ago," said the old man, "but it was from a great height. I cannot tell you such things as sailors need to know." "Do you mean you were flying in the air, sir?" Eustace blurted out. "It was a long way above the air, my son," replied the old man. "I am Ramandu. But I see that you stare at one another and have not heard this name, and no wonder, for the days when I was a star had ceased long before any of you knew this world, and all the constellations have changed." "Golly," said Edmund under his breath, "he's a retired star." "Aren't you a star any longer?" asked Lucy. "I am a star at rest, my daughter," answered Ramandu. "For when I set for the last time, decrepit and old beyond all that you can reckon, I was carried to this island. I am not so old now as I was then. Every morning a bird brings me a fireberry from the valleys in the sun, and each fireberry takes away a little of my age. And when I have become as young as the child that was born yesterday, then I shall take my rising again, for we are at earth's eastern rim, and once more tread the great dance." Wonderful, fully mythic thing. You understand why his hair is silver and his robe and everything is the silver, tingling silver of a star. This is a star reimagined, as it were, and in this world expressed in human form. Full of mythic resonance. But, of course, Lewis very deliberately has somebody who's in our modernist, materialist, analytical mode in the person of Eustace Scrub to ask the questions. So, "I shall once more tread the great dance." That's the whole old world view speaking. "In our world," said Eustace, "a star is a huge ball of flaming gas." "Even in your world, my son, that is not what a star is, but only what it is made of. And in this world you have already met a star, for I think you have been with Kariakin." But that is brilliant. Just that. In our world, a star is a huge ball of flaming gas. Even in your world, my son, that is not what a star is, but only what it's made of. Now, I think that distinction between what a thing really is in its innermost being and what it happens to be made of is one of the most important distinctions you can teach anybody. Of course, it's a very ancient distinction. I mean, it's a distinction that Aristotle made between substance, which is the essence of a thing, and accidents, which is just the bits of matter it happens to be made of at the moment. But we've been so good at analysing the bits of matter, we've forgotten what substance is, we've forgotten what form is. We've forgotten that a thing can have a true being, which is more than its assembled ingredients. And of course, we have only to look into ourselves to know that, because we can be analysed as a bunch of chemicals or a bunch of enzymes unwinding or the patterning of DNA or the selfish gene or any of these things. But that doesn't sum up, that doesn't account for the extraordinary mystery that we wake up to of our personhood and our being and our inner conscious presence. And Lewis very generously says, well, if we are more than what we are made of, then why can't stars be more than what they are made of? That's not what a star is, it's just what a star is made of. I think that's such an important distinction, and it's a distinction that actually our world and culture have forgotten, and it's always good to have C.S. Lewis remind us of a wisdom that we've lost. Anyway, thanks for calling round, and it's a pleasure to share that passage with you as well.